Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Verve Learning video. Today, we're going to be talking about accounting, and in this one specifically, just an introduction to all things accounting as it relates to assistants. So before we start off, you're probably wondering, what is accounting for assistants? Well, in a nutshell, it's taking agreements and making sure clients are paid on time and correctly for the work being done. It's also making sure all commissions, meaning, sending 10% to the manager, 5% to the attorney, et cetera, are paid out correctly. Now that's all great and dandy, but how does this actually play out? How do clients get paid? How does money go from the buyer to the client and pass through Verve? Well, here's how it works. First, the deal is closed. Then the assistant will distill deal points from the agreement or counter emails or just something from their boss. More on that in the distilling deal points video coming later. Then the assistant will create a booking, which means formally logging it into entertainment. Then they'll invoice, which means telling the buyer that you owe us this amount of money at this time for this step. It's due by this time. And then hopefully they'll send it to us and the money comes to Verve. We pay out commission and then pay the client. Pretty simple. The only exception, of course, is if the client requests that the money go directly to them or the money go to their manager and then they pay us commission and it goes to the client. But more times than not, the money goes to Verve, and that's how accounting prefers it. All right, let's go through each of these in a little more depth. So first, we'll kick it off with deal closed. So what happens specifically when the deal is closed? Well, the agent and the attorney have been negotiating with BA Business Affairs, who's kind of like the attorney for the studio, and they close a deal. An example of this is on the right here. So we see a counter email where the terms are at the bottom. There's more, it just got cut off, and they're constantly going back and forth and saying, this color is our best and final, or this color is our counter to your last offer, or something like that. And then eventually they close, and then you move on to distilling deal points. So you take the contract or negotiation emails or just something your boss tells you. So you take that and you distill deal points. It's this intermediate step. So it's like going from this, which is the contract, and translate it into the deal points on the right there. So it's just the simplified version that doesn't have all of the legal jargon and all that stuff. It's just all the stuff that we care about. This much money broken up, this step, this step, this step, this step. And then you take the deal points and you use them to create a booking. So now you have the deal points, you pop them into a booking. More on the bookings later, but this is it in a nutshell. It goes to that detail box at the top, which is a summary, and then translates down to these lines down here so that we can generate reports such as, how much the company expected to earn, what lines are due, what lines need to be paid out and stuff like that. And then we move on to the invoice. So when it's appropriate, the assistant will right click on a specific line, like in that picture right there, assign an invoice number, and that triggers accounting to generate an invoice and send to the invoice contact, which is usually BA, the person you negotiated with, not always the case. So then the email goes out, usually to the invoice contact, looks like this on the right, with your agent CC'd, and then hopefully they pay us shortly, and we move on to the next step, which is that the money comes to Verve, so we get a check, we get a wire, something like that. We pay out commissions, and then we pay the client. So it looks a little bit like this. Say for $100,000 commencement of rewrite step, 10,000 goes to the manager, 5,000 to the attorney. We take 10,000 and then send 75,000 to the client. And then accounting marks that line as paid. All right, now that you have a little overview of how that accounting process works and how clients get paid, let's talk about client paperwork. So client paperwork is super important. It's something we're always trying to get better at, always have that client paperwork. One thing you need to know, we can't legally handle client money without key paperwork. We need to have common pieces of paperwork on hand if a buyer ever asks for it. We need that I-9, W-9, or W-4 if they don't have a loan out, articles of incorporation, et cetera, et cetera. Not having client paperwork delays the client being paid. No one wants to not be paid because their agent doesn't have the paperwork. So get that paperwork as soon as you sign the client. Next question you might be wondering, what is a loan out? I just mentioned it. It's an entity that's owned by the client that's not taxed upfront, but it only pertains to that specific state. It's feasible once they reach a certain threshold of income. So they get to a certain point and it's time to form a loan out. I don't know, it's like 50, 70,000 a year, something like that. Next question you might be wondering, what does that mean for assistants? Different paperwork. So whenever someone forms a loan out, you just send them the newly incorporated DocuSign link. and then they can update all of their paperwork. They'll update the W-4 to become a W-9, all the Verve paperwork so that it has the loan out part signed instead of the individual part, and there's some more stuff. Now let's talk about the specific paperwork. Each team has slightly different paperwork, but the needs are mostly the same across the board with some differences. There's a lot of overlap. Let's go through some of the common pieces of paperwork. First, we got client info form. This has got all that information on there, the phone number, the address, who their reps are, who their attorney is, who their manager is, if they're in a union, SAG, WGA, DGA, any number pertaining to that, and some more information. Next up, manager attorney commission authorization. This is just a form that authorizes us to send commission to their third-party people and also take 10%. So, I have a manager, you can send them 10%. I have an attorney, you can send them 5%. And you, Verve, I can send you 10%. Next up, direct deposit authorization. This is just authorizing us to deposit it directly into their bank account. Letter of direction. This is just saying that the money can now come to Verve. They were at another agency before. Check authorization. This means we can receive checks on their behalf. I-9. This is your eligibility to work in the United States. W-4, W-9, W-8BEN, W-8BEN-E. The first two are the domestic versions of this piece of paperwork that basically gives tax information, and then the latter two is the international equivalent. W-4 is if you don't have a loan out, you're an individual. W-9 is if you have a loan out. Same thing for W-8BEN, W-8BEN-E. Think about the E means entity, so that's the one if you have a loan out. Then passport or other form of ID. So this goes hand in hand with the I-9. On, I believe, the second or third page, there's a couple columns and you need to satisfy that requirement. Usually people provide their passport or their driver's license, but you can also put in your social security number, and there's a few other options. Plus, if you have a loan out, articles of incorporation. This is something that the government gives to you when you incorporate. And basically it includes this specific EIN or federal ID number, which is super helpful for filling out some of the other paperwork. Next up, moving on to the anatomy of a booking. So now we're going more and more in depth. Bookings are probably the most important part of accounting at Verve. This is how we track all of the deals, all the money that's coming in, know which money has come in, know which money we expect to come in, and also lots more information. So let's break it down into a few different sections so it's not quite as intimidating. I know you see this and it's like all this information, so let's just break it down. First, the detail box. This is like the summary, the outline, if you will. And this is where you take the deal points, you pop them in there. Client and project info, this is all this extra information, union, type, position, splits, all that good stuff. Click on this other tab, you get the lines, fees and expenses. And then another tab, invoicing. This is where you put that invoice contact in. If you don't put this in, we don't know where to send the invoice. So let's zoom in on the first one, detail box. So like I said earlier, this is where the deal points go in. They're broken up into these headings. Seems a little confusing at first, but you'll quickly get the hang of it if you just play around with it for a little while. So basically these little headings break up the different parts of the deal points. So you write it in on the left there under whatever heading you want, press tab, publishes it to the right. If you don't know the difference between guaranteed and optional, guaranteed fees are fees that the buyer has to pay the client. Optional fees are fees that the buyer can opt into paying. So for example, on this one, they have to pay for a first draft, and then they can decide, do we want to trigger a rewrite? If so, cool. Then they'll trigger the rewrite. Your boss will tell you that you'll invoice for commencement of rewrite for $32,500. If not, then they can just leave it right there. But this is helpful because we need to know what money we're definitely going to earn as an agency and then what money we might earn. So it's helpful to break it up like that. There's also some other specifications in there. Zooming out and zooming in onto the next one, we're going to talk about fees and expenses now. This is where you take those deal points and then you break them up into lines for each step and get super specific, get the job dates in there, the due dates, the amount, percentage on commission. What if, we're not taking commission on this, but we're still processing payment? That all goes in right here. What sort of fee type? On the left, you can see fee versus optional fee. That's super important. Like I said earlier, this is where you can assign an invoice number. So just right click in this column, assign new invoice number, and that triggers accounting to send an invoice to the invoice contact. Pretty simple, but good to know the lay of the land. Additionally, this is where you can go and see if we've invoiced, received money, or are expected to receive money. So if someone's like, have you received delivery of first draft? Click on that second line. You see right there, it says status paid. Yes, we have received money. Have we received the third line, optional commencement of rewrite? No, we haven't. It's open, $0. We haven't even invoiced. So this is a good place to check if anyone has any questions like that. Zooming out again and back on in. Next, we're going to talk about invoicing. So like I said earlier, this is where the invoice contact goes. Super important. If you don't have this, we can't send the invoice because we have no one to send it to. We don't know who to send it to. One thing that's helpful to remember is that the invoice contact for a studio is usually the same across all projects. Good thing to remember, they must be linked to the company in IE. There's a few other pitfalls. We'll talk about that later with the invoicing checklist, but it needs to be linked to the company. You need to choose it from that blue little drop-down arrow right there. Same for the email down there. You can't just paste it in. It does make a difference for when accounting generates it. So just make sure to do everything right here. And that pretty much sums up what a booking is. But before we finish with bookings, I want to highlight one really quick thing. Boom. Booking numbers. This is a 4-digit unique number that's assigned to each booking. It's super helpful for whenever you're reaching out to accounting here at Verve. Always provide the booking number. Of course, you can provide the name of the project, but a lot of the times there can be multiple clients with different bookings relating to the same project, especially in TV, or different episodes relating to the same project. So always important to include that 4-digit number. Sometimes you can even say booking number 4474. Could you reorder the lines? Like, you don't even need to really name the title, but might as well put it all in there because it's helpful. Another thing you can do with the booking number, now that you know it, is if you click on the number right there, enter any 4-digit number, it'll take you to the corresponding booking. So that could be helpful to fly between bookings and not get confused. All right, I know I said there's one more thing, but there's actually two more things I just want to highlight really quick. The buyer. So if you look on the left side over here, the buyer, in this case, is Paramount. This is the person who is paying the client for the work. It's usually a studio, unless it's like independently financed, and then it can be the financier. But make sure to put that person there. And remember earlier when we said the invoice contact has to be linked to the company that is the buyer, well, Paramount there. And if you look down, Michael Flores in the invoice contact down below works at Paramount Pictures. So those line up right there. Before we proceed, I got to throw in an invoicing reminder. Remember this: if any booking info is incorrect, it will cause delays and headaches for accounting. Accounting says this is their biggest time waste when people just don't have the right information and then they right-click assign invoice number and forget about it. They have to then reach out to the assistant and be like, oh, you didn't have the episode number, or there's no union status, or the splits are incorrect. Now we sent the money to the wrong person, or I don't even know who to send this to because you didn't put in an invoice contact, anything like that. So to be safe, use the invoicing checklist in the accounting overview guide before triggering any invoice. I took a screenshot of it and put it up here on the right, but like I said, it's in the accounting overview guide. Just running through it real quick. Number 1, is the agent correct? 2, is the buyer correct? 3, is the union status correct? Is the invoice contact correct? And within that, there's a bunch of these pitfalls. It's super seemingly arbitrary, but it does make a difference for when accounting has to generate these through IE. If any information is incorrect, it's a huge delay, huge slowdown, and it's better to just get it right out of the bat. Invoicing is also just a great opportunity for you to go through this checklist and make sure you set up the booking correctly. Now, you can skip this if you've already invoiced a bunch of times before and you know it works. But when you just set up a booking and you're invoicing for the first time, please make sure to check out this checklist and run through it. It'll save yourself and accounting a lot of time down the road. Alrighty, so we invoiced. Hopefully there were no hiccups. The invoice went to the invoice contact and money is on the way. Once that invoice goes out, if the money doesn't come instantly, you can also follow up on the email every week until the money arrives. That's called chasing money. It can get super in depth, or there could be disputes and the agent has to get looped in. Not going to jump into that right now. This is going to be an overview, but hopefully you just get paid on time within a week. And when that happens and the check comes to Verve and is received by accounting, then you're going to get this email, which comes from accounting: checks received with the date it came in, and the list of all the checks you got. Let's look at this a little closer. So you'll notice we got lines that are black, lines that are red. What does black mean? It means it's good. It means that the check came in and it corresponds to a line in the booking. Amazing. Red means you got a problem. We got the check. They looked in the bookings that this supposedly corresponds with, and they don't have a line that matches the amount on the check. That's like, uh-oh, got to figure this out. So they'll notify you via this email, maybe provide a little note there on the right if they have any sort of hints or leads. And then you as the assistant have to then figure out what's going on. Do I just need to add more lines? Do I need to reach out to BA and see what's going on? So, some of the things you might have to do here is, reread the agreement, ask the invoice contact, add lines, et cetera, et cetera. But don't forget, accounting can't process money and pay clients if there is no corresponding line. They can't just be like, oh, no line, whatever. We're just going to send the money to the client anyway. They have to get that line. We need to be able to track this money and assign it to a specific place. We're not just going to send it willy-nilly. For that reason, you got to get this done hopefully within the same day or the same 2 days that it happened. This is not something to sit on, because if you wait on this for weeks and weeks on end, that basically means we're holding on to a client's money, and you as the assistant probably wouldn't like it if Verve wasn't paying you your paycheck just because they couldn't get their act together. So make sure to reserve some time, if you can at all, to get these problem lines and checks figured out so that the client can get paid on time. One thing that is super, super helpful to track all the money that's coming in is a money grid. And it looks like this thing on the bottom here. This is a little excerpt from a pre-existing one, and it corresponds to that Megan McDonald dark matter check on the top for $8,059. Money grids, same info as the booking, bit redundant, but it's simplified and it's a good way for you to track it and keep an eye on it. Think about it like taking notes in class. You probably don't refer to those notes later. You might, but it's the act of writing it down and tracking it all and knowing what's going on there that gives you a little more ownership and mastery over the money coming in. So when we get this checks received email, you go into your money grid and you see that week ending 9/10/21, 8,059 right there. You just mark it as green, put in the amount we received and the date we received it, and you're on your way. Next up, accounts receivable. So what is accounts receivable? Well, every month, accounting sends assistants and their agents a list of all lines that are past their due date. It looks a little bit like this on the right. It's just something they can generate with entertainment. And what it means for you as an assistant is that it's a reminder for you to check and see if you need to follow up on any outstanding invoices. So if you're going down here and you're like, oh yeah, I invoiced for delivery of first draft and producing services for Jim Adler on The Good Doctor. I'm just going to go in my email, follow up on that. Good reminder. Next one is push dates that aren't due. So for example, we got Young Houdini lines 3 and 4 there on this grid right here. And basically, maybe you put in these lines with arbitrary due dates and now the time has come, but the client hasn't actually delivered that first draft or revision. Just go into IE and you can push it, I don't know, a month or 2 ahead of time to when you expect them to actually do these lines. Another thing you might check, invoice on overdue lines. So you look in here and you see, Wendy Stryker Hauser on Under Pressure, commencement of writing services. That could be a reminder to you to go, I need to invoice on that because that's due. Always get approval from your boss first, but it's a good reminder for you to ask your boss. Additionally, if any bookings are done, maybe, going down to the bottom here, looking at Outlander, Margot Yee, writing services, the booking is done. We're not expecting any more money. Just reach out to accounting, tell them the booking number and say, can you close out this booking? It just tells the system, we're not expecting any more money here. Easy. Now, when it comes to strategy for accounts receivable, the best thing to do is just go through them one by one and just knock off the ones you know for sure. So in any accounts receivable, you're going to go down and you're going to go, oh, this one, duh, I'm waiting on that money. I'll follow up. Cross it off, cross it off, cross it off. This one, I don't really know what to do here. Should I follow up? Should I send an invoice? Should I push the dates? Put a little question mark, move on to the next one. Go through each one. Take these 10 lines, break them down into 3 you're not so sure about. Ask your boss if you can talk to them about accounts receivable. Ask them about those 3 lines and they'll give you the answers. So that's just a helpful way to deal with accounts receivable when it comes. It can be a little overwhelming, but if you just knock off the stuff distill the question mark lines, ask your boss. Great opportunity for you to kind of touch base on these lines. Your boss wants to get the money to the clients. They won't mind talking to you about it. Definitely take the time to talk to your boss about it. Alrighty, well, that's it for the accounting overview. Thank you so much for listening. Accounting can definitely be a little daunting, so stick in there. It's something that you just have to do to get better at. The numbers, they don't lie. You have to be exact, you have to be precise, but at the same time, it is a little crazy out there, and don't feel bad that you don't know what's going on. A lot of people are pretty confused with accounting, so don't be afraid to ask questions either to your coworkers or to BA or your boss based off of the type of question. And you'll get better at it eventually, and it won't be so daunting. So just stick in there. And thank you so much for listening, and tune in next time.